Thank you for having me. Michigan's a great district. I did a little bit of research before I came on today. I know that you guys are extremely big district in terms of club size and that. And I know you have folks like Mark Katz out there, who has been a big help for me in my training moving forward. So I want to say thank you again for having me. For those of you who did not hear, my name is Michael Boles. I am the current governor of the East Missouri District for the next 11 days at least. And I will be your guide on this little adventure we're getting ready to take. Now, I want to let you guys know right from the start, this training is based heavily on the teachings of Simon Sinek and his book on leadership called The Infinite Game. This is going to be a brief overview of his infinite strategy. And for a deeper look, if this does interest you, I highly recommend getting the book for yourself. Again, it's called Infinite Game. He also has two other books on leadership. One is called Leaders Eat Last, and the next one is called Start With Why. And with that, I invite you to sit back. If you are a note taker like I am, please get your pens and paper ready, and we will get started. Have you ever wondered how the U.S. could be so successful inside Vietnam, yet come home with a mission failure? I don't know if you know that, but we won a great deal of the battles over in Vietnam, but we came home mission failures. How does that happen? And what is it about Apple Computer that makes them such a successful company? Why would people stand in line for hours and hours on end so they could spend $1,000 to buy a cell phone from a computer company? And speaking of cell phones, did you know that the company that invented digital camera technology is now bankrupt? It's true. Everybody out there listening has a cell phone, and on that cell phone has a digital camera on it. This training is coming to you through the use of a digital camera. But Kodak filed for bankruptcy in 2012. How does that happen? The U.S. Navy SEALs, they are admired worldwide for their teamwork. Their performance level is unmatched by any other special forces team. There is no debate. What is it that they do differently? And why is it that even though the message of Optimus International is as powerful as it has ever been in our 100-year history, and the need for optimism has never been greater in our society, why are we losing members at an alarming rate? Why do we struggle to find new people to fill our leadership roles? Why does it seem like we've been on this downward path? And the most important question of all, how do we change it? Ladies and gentlemen, during this training, I'm going to answer those questions for you. I will challenge 50 years of leadership strategy. I'm going to start you down a new path that will overturn all of those strategic principles. The only thing I ask is that you choose a course of bravery and open your mind to the possibility that there might be a better way to lead. I invite you today to start a journey that has no ending. I invite you to learn about infinite leadership. So to understand infinite leadership, the first thing we have to understand is that there are two types of games in this world. There are finite games and there are infinite games. And finite games and infinite games have characteristics that define them. So let's look at them. For example, finite games, they have a list of known players. They have a fixed set of rules that do not change throughout the course of play. They have a very distinct beginning. They have a very distinct ending. Sometimes they have a distinct middle. They have an agreed upon objective on what it takes to win. We agree what the metric is for us to win the game, meaning that there's going to be a winner. Infinite games, on the other hand, have both known and unknown players. The rules in an infinite game not only can change, they often do change during the course of the play. And the objective of an infinite game is to perpetuate the game, to stay in the game as long as possible. And because there is no time horizon, there is no beginning, middle, or end, there are no winners and there are no losers. Instead, what happens is players or teams will leave the game when they run out of the will or the resources to play, but the game continues on without them. So here are some examples. Some examples of finite games are going to be like football, baseball, chess, finite games. If you think about these games and we think about the characteristics that go along with them, we see that there's a known set of players. The Detroit Lions are going to take on the Chicago Bears, right? Known set of players. The rules don't change. We have umpires, we have referees there to tell us what the rules are. They go by a rule book. They don't get to change or rewrite the rule book. Has a very distinct beginning, first pitch. A very distinct ending, checkmate, game is over. Sometimes there's a distinct middle, and J-Lo and Shakira come out and they dance on stage during that middle. Examples of infinite games would be things like the very popular online game World of Warcraft, which, as I understand it, is kind of like the modernized version of Dungeons and Dragons. And if you're not into elves and wizards and unicorns and all that Middle Earth stuff, well then, I'm sure you all probably remember this game, Farmville. If we think about these characteristics, do we know everybody who's playing World of Warcraft? Well, I mean, we could look it up right now, but do we know who's going to be playing them tomorrow or the next day or next week? And how do you win at Dungeons and Dragons? You can't. And isn't the idea of the Dungeon Master to change the rules as the game goes? You know, when it comes to Farmville, I used to love Farmville. I used to play it all the time. I don't play it anymore. I didn't lose at Farmville, but I definitely lost the will to play. I can tell you that. So I don't play anymore. So what happens is, what we know about these games is, to be successful in either one of these games, you're going to have to develop a strategy on what it takes to be successful. And from here on out, we're going to say any strategy that's going to make you successful for a finite game is going to be called a finite strategy, and thus you're a finite player. Doesn't mean you're a bad person, doesn't mean you're going to hell, or your taxes are going to get increased or anything crazy like that. It just means that you have a strategy that is well suited for a finite game. And on the other end, if you have a strategy that is well suited for an infinite game, then you're an infinite leader and you're using an infinite strategy. And what we know about infinite players and finite players and their strategies, a couple of things we know is this. If you take a finite player and put them up against other finite players or a player inside of a finite game, that's a very stable system. Football is stable. Baseball is stable. We also know that if you take infinite players and put them up against infinite players inside of an infinite game, that system is also very stable. World of Warcraft, very stable. Dungeons and Dragons, very stable. Candy Crush, very stable. The problem arises when you take an infinite player and put them in you take a finite player, and put them inside of an infinite game playing against other infinite players. When this happens, we know that finite player eventually, they might be highly successful for a while, but eventually they will find themselves in quagmire. This is a 100% certainty. It's going to happen. If you see a situation where you see a finite player inside of an infinite game doing very well, it's just a matter of time. They're going to find themselves in quagmire. They're going to find their wheels spinning. And eventually, when they're getting that quagmire, they're going to lose the will and or the resources to continue playing. When I tell you that this kind of stuff has very real world implications, it's not just online gaming. It's not just going down to the stadium and watching the Tigers play. This has very, very real world consequences. And no other example is the idea of a finite player finding themselves in quagmire. No other example is more to the point than the war in Vietnam. The United States in Vietnam won 95% of all the battles. You heard that right, 95% of all the battles. They won every single major battle, including the Tet Offensive. Militarily speaking, we won the Tet Offensive. So how did we come home mission failure? And the answer is this: we were using a finite strategy. We were fighting to win the war, to stop the spread of communism. Very finite goal. The North Vietnamese were fighting for their right to exist. They were fighting for their right to be able to say, this is the kind of government we had. And let me preface this. This is not an endorsement of communism. As a matter of fact, I'll go on the record and saying I don't agree with communism in any way, shape, or form. This is like Bob Costas telling you the score of the game. A finite player inside of an infinite game using a finite strategy, and lo and behold, what happened? Eventually, back home, we started losing the political will to continue to be in Vietnam. We started using resource after resource after resource. We lost the will and we came home. So what does this mean? What does this mean? Now that we know that this has very real world implications, I have a question for everybody out there, and it's this one. Is our organization considered part of a finite or infinite game? Well, let's look at our characteristics. Do we have known, or do we have known and unknown players? I mean, we can pull up our rosters and we can see who's an optimist today, but do we know everybody who's going to be an optimist tomorrow or next week? And don't our rules change? If I remember talking with Governor Pam, she kind of told me that you had 6 rule changes last night. I think you were calling them amendments or policy changes. Don't we have governance committees whose entire job is to deal with changes? When we cross the border, don't our tax code changes? So yeah, our rules change all the time inside of our game. And how do you win at optimism? What's that look like? What's the metric? Don't know, can't say. So it seems pretty obvious that optimism, that our organization is part of an infinite game. And if it's going to be part of an infinite game, then it only makes sense that we should use an infinite strategy to be successful inside of that game. Meaning we should lead with an infinite mindset. And if we're going to lead with an infinite mindset, there are 3 undeniable truths. Whether you agree with me or not does not matter. These are undeniable truths. And they are this. Number 1, we do not get to choose whether the game is infinite or finite. The game is what the game is, regardless of our opinion. We don't get to choose. We do, however, get to choose whether or not we're going to be a part of that game. If you're sitting here watching this, you've made the choice. You've made the choice to be a part of the game. Each and every day you get up, you make a choice to be a part of the game. And the final one, we get to choose what kind of strategy we're going to use going forward. We get to choose this. Today, we're going to talk about using an infinite mindset or an infinite strategy so that we can be successful inside of our infinite game. And to use this infinite mindset, there are 5 essential practices. There are 5 essential practices of using an infinite mindset. And they are, number 1, we're going to advance the just cause. Number 2, we're going to build trusting teams. Number 3, we're going to study our worthy rivals. We're going to prepare for existential flexibility. That's going to be interesting when we get into that. And number 5, we're going to demonstrate the courage to lead. And here's the idea, folks. These essential practices, these aren't a la carte. You don't get to pick which ones you like and let the other ones slide. If you're going to be an infinite leader, you have to advance all of these. You have to go for all of these. And we're going to take these one at a time. We're going to take these one at a time. So let's start with the first one, advance a just cause. A just cause is your organization's purpose. It's your guiding light. It's the reason you do what you do. Optimist International has a very good just cause. It's on the screen, to bring out the best in our youth, our communities, and each other. We do very well remembering the bring out the best in our youth, and we do a decent job doing the bringing out the best in our communities. How well are we doing the bring out the best in each other? What programs fit inside that model that you have? What new programs would you have? This is our just cause. Now, to be a just cause, it has to fit a couple different rules. And number one, it has to be affirmative. It has to be optimistic. You have to be for something. Being against something isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just doesn't make it a just cause. Let me explain. You can be against childhood hunger. Everybody's against childhood hunger, right? Any decent person out there. But does that make it a just cause? No, and here's why. Let's say you have a campaign, you're going to be, we're against childhood hunger, we're against childhood hunger. And then Doritos and M&Ms and Little Debbie's and Dr. Pepper call you up and say, hey, we're going to give you as much of our product free as you can pass out to the kids. Have you just ended childhood hunger? Well, yeah, I guess technically you did, but is that the message you really want to send? Is that really the goal you were looking for? It's not. So instead of being against childhood hunger, your just cause could be, we are for good childhood nutrition. And just by flipping that around, just by changing that little tweak there, when you say, I know I'm for good childhood nutrition, it's not just about the food, because now you can bring in exercise. Now you can bring in mental health. It starts opening up avenues for you to advance a just cause. So it's always better to be for something than it is to be against something. The other thing it has to be is it has to be inclusive. It has to be inclusive. Everybody who wants to advance your just cause has to be allowed in. And when I say it has to be inclusive, I mean your just cause. The just cause has to be inclusive. And we're going to touch upon that a little later. Number three, has to be service-oriented for the primary benefit of others. As optimists, I think that's pretty par for the course for us. We're pretty good with that. Number four, has to be able to endure technological, cultural, political changes. Yeah. Movements, again, they're great. They can be great, but they are not going to be infinite. Because by definition, they start somewhere, they move, they stop, and they're done. That's not infinite. So whatever your just cause is, it has to be able to stand the test of time. It has to be able to stand the test of time. And the final thing that a just cause has to be is it has to be idealistic. You want it to be big, you want it to be bold, and ultimately unattainable, right? Big, bold, and unattainable. Again, this is something as optimists it comes pretty natural to us. And when we talk about just cause, here's another example. This is one of my favorite just causes. See if you recognize this. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And we can keep going with that, right? We love, especially here in America, we love that just cause. But let's think about this for a second. And let's think about how this just cause and advancing it can keep us moving forward. When this was written, were the words actually true happening in society? Because the only people that could vote back then were white men that owned land. Yeah, even if you were white, but you didn't own land, you couldn't vote. You weren't equal under the eyes of the law. But as we advanced our just cause, we started to include white men as well, landowners and non-landowners together. And then we started including the Black culture and then women. Are we done? Is our advanced cause or our just cause, is it done? Look at our issues of today. with gay rights, religious rights, workers' rights, the role that money plays in our politics. Look at what's going on in our society. Is our just cause as Americans, is it done? Or are we still fighting to advance it? First practice is always to advance a just cause. Now, this comes with a kind of a warning. There's a warning when it comes to just causes. Something that can get you into the weeds. Number one, being best is not a just cause. Being the best out there is not a just cause. That's achievable. You're going to start looking for metrics. I can say right now, is Optimus International the best service organization in the world? Yep, sure is. In my opinion, they are. And I will argue with anybody out there. But what's the metric? What does it look like? Don't know. Don't know. So being best is not a just cause. Number two, this one might throw some ripples out there. Growth. Growth is not a just cause. Now, that is not to say that growth in our organization is not important. It is important. What I'm saying is it's not your guiding light. It's not your leading principle. It's not what you're trying to advance. Growth is self-serving. It's not for the primary benefit of others. It's to help you. Now, don't get me wrong. Again, it doesn't mean that it's negative or it's a horrible thing. You might be wanting to grow so you can help more people, but it's not your overall just cause. It's a tool that you're using to advance your just cause. The third one, moonshots. Moonshots are not just causes. Now, for the younger crowd out there that might not know what a moonshot is, this refers to President Kennedy back in the 60s making a speech where he said that we will go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And when he did that, a lot of people thought, yeah, you're crazy. We're never going to get there. That's too difficult. Of course, we did get there. It took a while, took a long while, but we finally got there. So making these big, grandiose goals or just causes that seem like they might be impossible, be careful. You might be able to get there. So let's stop for a second and let's think to ourselves, how did we get to where we're at right now? How did we get to where we're at right now? Because before we go forward, we have to know where we come from. We are using finite strategies, not just inside of Optimus International or Rotary or all the other service organization, inside of our businesses. You see it everywhere. It permeates our culture. And it wasn't always that way. Instead, what happened was, in the 1970s, a Nobel Prize winning economist named Milton Friedman came along. And after winning the Nobel Prize, he was hot. He was hot ticket. And people wanted to hear what he had to say. And he wrote an op-ed. And in that op-ed, he put out the thoughts and the belief that the sole and primary goal for any company out there, any business out there, was to make profits for its shareholders. That was it. Anything else that came along happened as just a bonus, as an added extra. The only idea or the only reason a business is in business is to make money for their shareholder. You've probably heard this called shareholder supremacy. This is where the term comes from. But before this concept took hold, it was really unheard of to sacrifice employees for profit. It's not so much that way now, is it? Before this concept was accepted, employees were loyal to the company, and companies were loyal to loyal to the employee as well. And coming out of high school or college and working for one company and then retiring from that company, that was the norm. That's what we did. It was unheard of to have 5, 6, 7 jobs before you retired. But when CEOs were given the incentive to produce finite-minded returns and increase profits each and every quarter, well, then it became normal to lay off workers so they could make that quarterly profit threshold or quota. It became normal to move production overseas, move factories overseas, so we could have cheaper labor force, so we could increase our profit for our shareholders. And this is not a right versus left thing. In fact, when Hollywood got this, they romanticized the idea. They romanticized the idea. See if you recognize this, and we're going to see if this is going to play for you.
The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed in all of its forms. Greed for life, for money, for love, knowledge, has marked the upwards surge of mankind, and greed, you mark my words, will not only save Teldar Paper, but that other malfunctioning corporation called the USA. Thank you very much.
And look where greed has gotten us. Look where we are today. You think about this, that movie came out in 1987. The high water mark for Optimist International membership, 1988. This is when shareholder supremacy really took hold. It's almost like finite thinking, shareholder supremacy, that kind of thinking is a natural deterrent for optimists. Moving on. Now, regardless if we're going to use a finite strategy or an infinite strategy, the idea, if you're in leadership, is you're going to have to deal with will and resources. That is part of being a leader, is you're going to have to deal with will and resources. Let's define the terms very quickly. When we talk about resources, obviously we're talking about things like money, right? Talking about money, talking about technology. It's coming that's a very handy resource right now as we speak. Social media. Optimist International has really done a lot in these last couple of years with social media, using that resource. We're doing a very good job on that. Time. Time is a resource. It's the only one of these that is non-renewable. Once you lose time, you've lost it. If you feel that this is a waste of your time right now, and what I'm telling you is a waste of time, I apologize. There's not much I can do about that. It just is what it is. I'm sorry. Hopefully I'm not, though. Hopefully you're thinking this is a good use of your time. And if you ask any leader worth their salt, any leader at all, they're going to tell you that the most valuable resource out there of any organization, hands down, there is no dispute, are your people, your members. That is your most valuable resource. Now let's talk about will. Will is a little bit more hazy. It's a little bit more fuzzy. Will is things like morale. It's your morale. It's motivation. It's inspiration. It's dedication. This is what it means to have will. If you're going to be in leadership, you're going to have to balance will and resources. You're going to have to make decisions based on the resources you have and the level of will that you have. And when it comes down to it, there's going to be times where you're going to have to choose between will or resources. And when that time comes, if you're going to be an infinite leader, will has got to outweigh your resources each and every time. Will has got to outweigh your resources. Will in all of its forms is what drives us to chase after our just cause. And that's not to say that resources aren't important. Resources are important. They're extremely important. I'm just saying that will needs to slightly edge them out. Will needs to slightly edge out resources. But here's the thing about will. Will has a cost. It comes with a price. The cost of motivation, inspiration, ensuring high morales, giving members a reason to be dedicated. It could cost you your money. You might have to spend some of your club money or your zone or district money or whatever. You might have to spend some money to increase that morale. Have a party, something like that. Recognition, plaque, certificate. It might cost you some of your money. But to be truly effective and truly impactful, the biggest cost of your will is going to be your time. It's going to be time. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's say, and I'm going to use her as an example, let's say Governor Pam were to send you an email. And in that email, it said, Dear so-and-so, I appreciate everything you did for me this year as governor. We could not have done this without you. I am dedicated to your success. If there's anything I can ever do, please let me know. Signed, Governor Pam, Michigan District. You'd read that and your will would go up a little bit. You'd have a little bit higher morale. But what were to happen if instead of getting that email, you went out to your mailbox and pulled out a card, an envelope, and that envelope had a card in it, and you opened up and it was a handwritten note from Governor Pam that said, Dear so-and-so, thank you for everything you've done this year. We could not have done it without you. I want to let you know I'm dedicated to your success from here on out. If there's anything I can do, please let me know. Thank you again. Exact same words, exact same sentiment. Which one's more impactful? The card is. The card is. And why? Because we know we took more of her time. We know she sacrificed her time to let us know that we were important. The cost of will to be truly impactful is always going to be your time. Always. Why is it important to make sure we really keep our eye on the ball when it comes to will? When times are good, your will is strong. There's no doubt about that. When the times are going really, really well, will is strong. That's when it's easy to have strong will. That's when will doesn't cost as much. It's when those rough times hit, when those down times hit, during pandemics, that's when you really want to double down and triple down on will. Because it's during those times is when the loyalty part and the dedication kick in. That's when the organization, your will has to be strong. As a leader, you have to be focused on that will of your club or your zone or your district or international altogether. As a leader, regardless if the tide is high or the tide is low, if you keep an eye on keeping your will strong, you'll always be better off. Always. The second essential practice of leading with an infinite mindset is to build trusting teams. As human beings, we are social animals. We are built to succeed more often and to greater heights, and we can also sustain more of life's ups and downs when we work together as teams. That's just how we're biologically engineered. This isn't my opinion. There's actually scientists who have spent their careers proving this very thing. One of the most important things that a team does for us is it provides security. It lets us feel safe. You think back to our caveman days. We didn't roam around out there alone. We formed clans, we formed tribes. It was to provide security from the outside world. And what we know today is, what the science tells us today is that when we feel safe, we're more innovative. We're open to trying new things. We're courageous. And those things are things that make us better prepared to not only survive, but to thrive inside the infinite game. If you are a leader out there, it is your job to build a team. Not just any team, though, a team that you can trust. And to commit to an atmosphere that allows those team members to feel safe. So how do we do that? Starts with vulnerability. Your team members need to be able to feel vulnerable without the fear of retribution. As a leader, one of the tools at your disposal is to show your own vulnerability, to let them know. This is where team building starts, is to let your people know, as a leader, that you cannot do this on your own. For some of us, that's a very tough lesson to learn. That we cannot do this on our own. We need help. But when you can communicate that to your team, when you can let them know that you don't have all the answers, that you're going to need their counsel moving forward, it's going to help them feel like they don't have to have all the answers either. It opens the door for them to share their ideas and then share their opinions. And after you've proven that it's okay to be vulnerable, you can open the door to allow your team to be honest with themselves, honest with you. Here's a rule. If you're taking notes, I'm going to pause for a second so you can write this one down. Never, and write this in all capitals, never retaliate for someone on your team telling you the truth. The rule is, inside of a trusting team, the truth should never hurt. Be mindful of this. Trust. Trust is the most important thing inside of a team. That's why we call it a trusting team and not a team. Trust is so important that we're going to bring in the Navy SEALs here for a second. And when I say trust, I want you guys to understand, I don't mean trust as you're going to do what you say you're going to do. That's not trust. That's reliability. And reliability and trust are two different things. Trust is the feeling that you have when other people on the team want the same outcomes as you. They have the same goals. They want to get to the same spot. Doesn't mean they agree on how to get there. You can have people inside your team disagree with how we get there, right? And that's healthy. That's perfectly fine. But you have to agree on where you're going. The Navy SEALs, when they look at things, when they go through school and they're going to pick their teams, they pick their teams based on two metrics: performance and trust. Or what they call it is, can I trust you with my life, which would be performance. Can I trust you with my life versus can I trust you with my wallet or my wife? That inner trust, that brotherhood trust. Do you have my back? Without me having to say, hey, have my back. So when they have trust, that inner trust or performance, you can see our matrix here. At the top right, you have people, and then you call them, they're high performance and high trust. Now you have people in our organization, we have people in our organization that fall into that category, and we're building our teams. Of course we want to fill our team with nothing but high performance, high trust people. That's easy. Of course we want that. And of course we want to keep the low performers and low trust off of our team. That's easy. But the world's not easy. The world has very real challenges. And every once in a while, you're going to run into people that have high performance. They do the job really, really well, but they don't agree with you on where you're going and your goals. Or maybe they're in the middle. They kind of agree where you're going, and they do an okay job. Meh. Or maybe they're full in. They are full in with your ideas, but they don't really perform that well. So who do you pick? How do you go about that? Well, inside the Navy SEALs, when it comes down to high performance and low trust, or low performance and high trust, they're going to pick this low performer and high trust over that high performer with low trust. They're going to pick them all the time. The idea being, I can teach you how to perform. We can hold each other accountable. We can make each other better. It's harder to teach trust than it is to teach performance. But here's the thing about being an infinite leader and building these trusting teams. Sometimes a low trust, low performer, they can change. They're not relegated there for the rest of their lives. As a matter of fact, a lot of times the reason they've become a low trust, low performer is because of the atmosphere inside of their club or their zone or their district. They fall into that category out of a necessity to survive, is the way they're looking at it. They shoot down all those new ideas or those novel opinions because they feel that those new ideas and those novel opinions, excuse me, are going to undermine the club makeup or the district makeup as they know it, as they feel comfortable with it. Or more importantly, it's going to undermine their place, their rank inside of that club or district or zone. But if you as a leader can build a trusting team in which the culture and the normalcy of it and seeking to actively promote other people or recognize their ideas and looking out for their success, if that becomes a coveted characteristic, and that's the people that you really are going to get the unofficial promotions, then there's a very good chance that that person who used to be a low performer of low trust will adapt. They'll adapt because they have a necessity to survive. They will adapt and they'll become a high performer of high trust. I want to give you an example, very real example of what I'm talking about in kind of a real world scenario. I say real world, it's not really real world. This is a clip from one of my favorite TV shows of all time, The West Wing. And for those of you who are fans, you'll recognize this right away. For those of you who aren't, let me set this up for you. In this scene, you have Josh and Leo. Leo's the gentleman wearing the darker suit on the right, and he's Josh's boss. Now, Josh has been showing signs of having PTSD. He's had to go see the White House shrink as it was to get tested out. And Josh is feeling vulnerable. He's feeling like he might lose his spot on the team. He might lose his voice on the team. Leo, as a leader, handles it just like this. See if you can recognize the signs.
How'd it go?
Did you wait around for me?
How'd it go?
He thinks I may have an eating disorder.
Josh.
And fear of rectangles. That's not weird, is it? I didn't cut my hand on a glass.
Inside of a trusting
broke a window in
team,
my
the truth should never hurt.
This guy's walking down the street when he falls in the hole. The walls are so steep he can't get out. A doctor passes by and the guy shouts up, "Hey, can you help me out?" The doctor writes a prescription, throws it down in the hole, and moves on. Then a priest comes along and the guy shouts up, "Father, I'm down in this hole, can you help me out?" The priest writes out a prayer, throws it down in the hole, and moves on. Then a friend walks by. "Hey, Joe, it's me, can you help me out?" And the friend jumps in the hole. Our guy says, "Are you stupid? Now we're both down here." The friend says, "Yeah, but I've been down here before and I know the way out." Long as I got a job, you got a job, you understand?
I mean, I show this clip for a very, very important reason. Because it shows the kind of leader we'd all like to have. It shows the kind of leader we want to have inside of a trusting team. The easiest way I can tell you about trusting teams is, if you're going to be a leader, be a Leo. Now, when we look at this, when we talk about culture, I want you to look at this and look at this like almost like it's a mathematical equation. When we talk about our culture and getting our culture right, culture equals values times behavior. Now, as kind of a mental exercise, we're going to say that this is a true statement. And let's define our terms just very quickly. Values. Values are what we say is important. Those are the promises you make. They're the way you talk. They're the way you present your idea, present others' ideas. It's the way you speak about others when they're not around. Those are our values. Our behavior, well, those are the actions that we actually take. So look at this as this. Let's say we were able to put a 0 through 10 value to both sides, to both values and behavior. Well, then if this was a 10 and this is a 10, then our culture is going to be a 100, and that's the best you can get. But what happens if our values, we're talking about people behind their back, we're negative in the way we speak, we're constantly shooting people down, not trying to seek out the deeper meaning of things, and our value is a 1, even though our behavior is as best as it can possibly be. What's 1 times 10? It's a 10. And at a rate of 100, that's horrible. Your culture's not good. And it goes the other way. Let's say you talk a great game, you're doing everything right speaking-wise, but you don't act on it. We flip it again. What's your culture like? Very low. You have to do both. You have to talk, you have to be mindful of the way you're interacting with people, both when they're there, both when people aren't there, and you also have to act correctly as a leader. I say this, and this seems very, very easy as far as a mathematical equation, but we all know in real life, this is difficult. There's a lot more gray area out there than what this slide's showing. This can be tough. If you're going to be a leader for any length of time, this is going to push you to your breaking point. It's going to push you to your limit. Be ready for it. Be ready for it. Be mindful of it. Because it is a lot easier said than done. Inside of a trusting teams build new leaders. They asked Simon Sinek, excuse me, they asked Simon Sinek, what's the best practical correlation of being a leader? And he said, being a parent. Being a parent is the best correlation of being a leader. And it's a great way to look at it if you think about it. Leaders, one of their most important responsibilities is to teach new members of our teams the skills needed so that they can be successful in the future. Much the same way a parent teaches their child the life lessons they need so that they can be successful in life. If we're going to lead with an infinite mindset, we have to understand that we're only going to lead for a finite period of time. And then somebody else is going to take our place. And then somebody else is going to take their place. And so on, and so on, and so on. And the training you pass on to others, as well as the quality of leadership that they're going to display, that's a direct reflection of the atmosphere that you've built as a leader. Trusting teams build new leaders. Number 3, we're going to go pretty quickly from here on out. Number 3, study your worthy rivals. This is our third essential practice. And when it comes to our worthy rival, our rival might be the form of another club, or they might be another district, or another organization altogether. But what our rivals are they're not our enemies. They're not our competitors. They're a rival. And they give us a tangible point of reference is what they do. They give us a way to gauge ourselves and how well we're doing. And by studying our worthy rivals, we can see what areas we need to improve on or possibly how we can improve. Our rivals help us get better at what we do. We also look at our rivals and decide if the actions that they are taking are ones that we want to take as well. Maybe they're taking an action that's following a different just cause than ours. And in this way, if we're being mindful of it, our rivals can help us become clearer on why we do what we do. To give you an example of this, IBM initially, in the early days, they refused to build what was called microcomputers, which would later be called PCs or personal computers. And as they did, Apple cornered the market. Apple cornered the market in the beginning. And eventually IBM said, we're going to build our own. When they did this, Apple openly welcomed, because they didn't view them as a competitor, they viewed them as a rival. Apple openly welcomed IBM into the market. And they used them to further their own just cause. And their own just cause was being the choice of those wanting to challenge the status quo. And if you think about it, to this day, to this very day, when we think of an IBM computer, we think of an office setting. We think of a straight-laced, conservative, conforming office setting. And when we think of someone using an Apple Mac, we think of revolutionaries. We think of people who are outside the box, thinkers, nonconformists. Apple used their rival, their worthy rival, to become clearer on why they were doing what they were doing. This also comes with a cautionary tale. You have to be aware of cause blindness. Cause blindness. This is what this is this is when you are so focused on your own just cause that you fail to see the value of learning anything else from those you disagree with. Wow, does that sound familiar in these political times, doesn't it? You fail to see the value of learning anything from those you disagree with or that have a different just cause. And you start to believe that they're stupid, or that they're less than, or that they're unworthy of studying. Players that suffer from cause blindness see something that doesn't fit their mold, or worse, seem to go against their just cause and decide to act in ways that ultimately can be destructive towards their own team. They show less humility. They become increasingly more arrogant. And when they do this, this causes innovation and flexibility to decrease. We had a very, very big example of cause blindness earlier this year in your home district of Michigan. Some of you already know what I'm getting ready to say. On February 27th, earlier this year, country music god Garth Brooks took stage in Detroit, Michigan, and he wore this very famous football jersey. Overnight, tens of thousands of fans took to social media of all different kinds so they could denounce Garth Brooks for supporting presidential candidate, remember this was back in February, presidential candidate Bernie Sanders in the upcoming 2020 election. I mean, they destroyed their albums, their CDs, other memorabilia. You had radio stations receiving calls from angry sponsors saying that I will never give you another advertising dollar again if you play one of his songs. But here's the problem. Garth Brooks wasn't supporting Bernie Sanders. Garth Brooks was wearing that jersey to honor a good friend of his that he went to school with that just happened to have the last name Sanders and just happened to wear number 20. Of course, here in Michigan, everybody knows that is the jersey of Barry Sanders, Hall of Fame running back. Those fans had cause blindness. That's what cause blindness is. Be very careful of that. The fourth, we got to existential flexibility. Existential flexibility is the fourth essential practice of an infinite leader. And what this is this is the capacity to initiate an extreme disruption to the current model or strategic course so that you can more effectively advance your just cause. This means you're going to make a big change so you can do better at advancing your just cause. As the times change, as technology changes, as our physical ability to advance our just cause changes, an infinite leader will always stay aware of those changes. And while they may fundamentally change or alter the way we currently advance our just cause, they're going to also make our organization stronger. They're going to make our organization better suited to advance our just cause in the future and beyond. Now, the following two slides we're going to look at are examples of companies regarding existential flexes. This is really going to, I think, sell it or bring it home so you understand what we're talking about. One of these is a company that should have made an existential flex and didn't, and the other one is going to be the company that did. Kodak. When Kodak was established, they had a just cause, and their just cause was to help everyday people, not just professionals, artists, or enthusiasts, enjoy the world of photography. And in the 70s, Kodak's research and development department announced to their CEO and their board of directors that they had invented a new way of taking pictures that didn't require any film, any special photo paper, developer, darkrooms. They figured out how to take pictures digitally. But at that time, Kodak ruled. They reigned supreme in the field of photography. They sold the best cameras, they sold the best accessories, the best film on the market, and they were virtually the only company to sell developer solution. Anybody who wanted to develop a picture back in those days pretty much had to buy the developer from Kodak. So when the board heard this news that they had this new technology, they decided to suppress it. Instead of grasping it and taking it farther, they decided to suppress its existence. They knew eventually it was going to come about, but they suppressed it because they didn't want to cut into their profits right now. Now, they were smart enough, they patented it. And as other companies came around and they learned how to produce their own digital photography goods, they had to pay Kodak some royalties. But eventually, those royalties ran out. And in 2012, with no royalties coming in and no one needing to buy developer from other old school equipment, Kodak filed for bankruptcy. Now in the world of photography, they barely exist at all. And they serve a small market of professional photographers, artists, and enthusiasts that still use darkroom techniques. They should have flexed, but they didn't. Steve Jobs, Apple. We use Apple a lot. In late 1979, Apple was emerging as a very successful company. They had already launched their Apple I and their Apple II computers. And Steve Jobs and his board of directors, they were invited to Xerox's research and development department. And while they were there, they were shown a new technology of something called a graphic user interface. Now, all the computer guys, they know exactly, and gals, they know exactly what I'm talking about. But for those of you who don't, just stick with us, we'll get there. They had a technology called a graphic user interface, or GUI for short. And what this was is this was a new way to talk to a computer. Because up until that point, to use a computer, you had to know computer language, like DOS. Upon leaving Xerox's facility, Steve Jobs told his board that they needed to immediately halt production of their next product line and invest in Xerox's GUIs and integrate them into Apple computers. And the board of directors thought Steve Jobs was insane. They told him, if we do this, we will be throwing away countless hours of hard work, countless hours of resources, money. They said, Steve, it'll blow up our entire business. To which Steve Jobs famously responded with, if we don't blow it up, somebody else will. Apple did listen to Steve Jobs eventually, and they did invest in, and they did use GUIs moving forward in their products. Now, for those non-computer folks, what is a graphic user interface? The best I can describe it, it's the computer function that allows you to move a cursor over top of an icon and click on it to open up a file, among other things. Now, could you imagine using a computer today and not using a mouse? That was an existential flex. Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the fifth and final practice of being an infinite leader, and that is the courage to lead. Everything we have discussed up until this point, everything we have discussed up until now has been, for the most part, pretty easy to explain, and it's been pretty easy to understand. I mean, having pride and passion inside of a just cause That's easy on paper. And we all agree that having a team is going to make us stronger and better equipped to face the world. We agree that the importance of trust inside of that team is huge. And that, yeah, even, doing what we say we're going to do and creating these cultures is going to help us bring out the best in ourselves. That's important. It's very easy to promote the building and training of new leaders, remembering to study our rivals so we can get an insight on how to better navigate our way. After all, that's an obvious practice, right? And yes, wanting to be aware of that idea that will change the game, not just now, but for future generations, that's something that everybody in leadership, who's ever had a position in leadership, they all dream about being able to do. However, if we do not exhibit the courage to lead as infinite leaders, none of the rest of this matters. Infinite leadership requires courage. Putting these practices into place is scary. People from within our organization and from without will continue to pressure you into doing things the way that they've always been taught, the only way they know. The way it's been done ever since Milton Friedman wrote his opinion piece advocating for shareholder supremacy. Infinite leadership means you have to lead with a concept that's only going to yield you results after you have consistently used these principles. There's no timeline for me to tell you when you're going to be successful with that. It's like if I were to tell you, start going to the gym on Monday and you start eating right, you're going to get in shape. But I can't tell you the day you're going to be in shape. Infinite leadership works the same way, with the added pressure that you're going to have finite leaders always wanting you to play their game. Standing up against that pressure takes courage. Deciding to use these principles starting Monday and beyond takes courage. As a leader, it is your responsibility to set the goals for your club or your zone or your district and beyond. Be careful when you're setting your goals, that you are not setting goals that are going to expire at the end of the year. Membership inside of our organization is sometimes used extremely finitely. You're going to be told you have to be a +6 or a +15 by September 30th to receive this award or that award. There's a scoreboard on the OI website that tells you exactly where you stand in terms of other districts, zones, and clubs. And it can be tempting. It can be tempting to use those numbers as a justification to alter the way you lead. But if you base your actions on that bottom line, you're always going to be subject to what others are doing. And look, no one wants to see those numbers or any other stat that shows their efforts in a negative light. But once you've used that bottom line as your goalpost, you're no longer an infinite leader. Resisting the urge to chase the bottom line takes courage. There's a quote that I absolutely adore, and it says, if you train your people the way you were trained, you're preparing them for a world that no longer exists. The world is changing. Our organization is changing. The game itself is changing. And while, yeah, we can remember with great reverence and yearning for the way things used to be, the simple fact of the matter is they're not coming back. It's never going to be that way again, ever. Fighting the change that is coming and continuing to do things the old way just because it's the old way and the way we've always done it is a waste of time. There is no blueprint or set of step-by-step manuals that's going to tell you, it's going to lay out what actions you need to be successful amidst all this change. To change with the times and strive to be better takes courage. There's good news, though. There's a new sun on the horizon, starting with all of you. Your journey as an infinite leader has just begun. You don't get to choose whether the game is infinite or not. The game is infinite. You have chosen to be part of the game. Choosing to lead with an infinite mindset takes courage. You are the author of this organization's future. You all get to decide what gets added to our story and what doesn't. When you leave this training, you get to start writing the next chapter for your club, for your zone, for your district, for Optimus International, for yourself. What is that story going to be? What mark will you leave? Will you add your name to the forgotten list of those who did everything the same as everyone else, or will you charter out a new course? As optimists, we believe that our actions affect our future. As leaders in Optimus International, you have the ability to affect our culture. Armed with an infinite mindset, what actions are you going to take? As infinite leaders, it is up to you to take the baton that's being passed to you and advancing our just cause and readying the new batch of leaders that you're going to eventually pass that baton on to. There are leaders in the rough right now waiting and wanting for a person like you to pick them up, polish them off, and commit to their future success. Because ladies and gentlemen, that's how you're going to build your legacy. To quote the musical Hamilton, legacy is about planting seeds in a garden you'll never get to see.
Thank you, Michael. We've run over. We need to jump to another meeting. We can't do that until this meeting ends. So if you could wrap up, I'd appreciate it.
I got 10 seconds.
Thank you.
All right. You have been placed exactly where you should be. As leaders who believe in bringing out the best in our youth, our communities, and each other, I hope today you can learn to do so infinitely. And thank you very much for having me.